The message arrived on a Tuesday. Not that Tuesday meant anything to the Keth, but Dr. Lena Chen would later find a strange comfort in the mundanity of the timing, that the most significant event in human history had interrupted her third cup of coffee and a stack of ungraded papers on stellar cartography. The signal came to every receiver humanity had ever built, simultaneously, as though the universe had cleared its throat. It was mathematics. Not the clumsy, hopeful mathematics of the old SETI broadcasts, primes and pi, the scientific equivalent of a child waving both arms. This was something else. A proof, built in a language no one had invented, that somehow every trained mind on Earth could partially read, the way you can almost understand song lyrics in a language you've never studied. It felt familiar in the way that dreams feel familiar. Structurally, ancestrally, Lena had been recruited to the Meridian within 72 hours. She didn't ask by whom. The question felt irrelevant. The ship was military, which she'd expected. What she hadn't expected was the briefing that followed. They received it too, Admiral Graves said. He was a wide man with a face like compressed granite, standing before a holographic display that showed a star map with a pulsing red at its center. Literally at its center. The galactic core. The Keth. Same signal, same timestamp. Their fleet departed 8 hours before ours. Then we're already behind, Lena said. We're faster. He said it the way men like him said everything, as though speed were a virtue unto itself, independent of direction. What's the weapons loadout on this vessel? Graves looked at her the way men like him looked at scientists. Sufficient. She stared at the red dot. 4 billion years old, the initial spectral analysis suggested. The structure, and the probes had confirmed it was a structure, regular geometry at a scale that made the mind skid sideways, had been sitting at the center of the galaxy since before multicellular life had figured out eyes. Admiral, she said carefully, whatever built that thing watched our sun form, which is why we need to get there first. She wanted to say, first to do what? She did not say this. She had learned, in 43 years of working adjacent to people with guns, that some questions were better held close and examined privately, in the dark, where they couldn't frighten anyone. They met the Keth vessel at the 10,000-kilometer boundary, a limit that had established itself through terrible demonstration 3 days prior, when the Keth frigate Unbroken Tide had fired a warning shot across the bow of a human scout probe. The machine had responded in 0.3 seconds. The Unbroken Tide still existed. That was the remarkable thing. It hadn't been destroyed or disabled. It had been changed. Every weapon system had become flowering plant matter, not Earth plants, not Keth plants, but something else entirely, something that had no business being alive in the vacuum of space and yet was, undeniably, extravagantly alive. Vines thick as conduits threaded through corridors. Blossoms the color of things Lena had no names for pressed against the portholes from the inside. The crew was unharmed, terrified, and wandering through what had become, in under a second, the most beautiful greenhouse any of them had ever seen. The machine had made its position on weapons clear. It had also, Lena noted in her report, demonstrated that it knew exactly what a weapon was. It had changed only those components. The crew quarters were untouched. The kitchen. The medical bay. Just the weapons. Surgical. Intentional. This did not comfort Admiral Graves. It fascinated Lena enormously. The communication had been arranged by parties on both sides who were, if not wise, at least frightened enough to approximate wisdom. A shuttle from the Meridian, a shuttle from the Keth Command vessel Ancestral Deep, both unarmed, both proceeding to a neutral point at the boundary. Lena had read everything available on Keth communication in the 14 days of transit. She felt approximately as prepared as a person who has read about swimming feels standing at the edge of the ocean. The Keth philosopher who boarded the shuttle was called you. The translation was imperfect. Keth names carried harmonic overtones that human vocal anatomy couldn't reproduce, so the universal translation system rendered a phonetic approximation and quietly discarded the rest. You was tall, bilaterally symmetrical in the broad strokes but not the details, with 4 upper limbs, 2 of which ended in structures that functioned as hands and 2 of which seemed primarily expressive, moving constantly, independently, the way human eyebrows move during conversation, adding a layer of meaning that Lena could see but not yet read. You regarded her with eyes the color of deep water and said, through the translator, "You are the one they sent to think." "I'm a scientist," Lena said. "Astrophysics, Some xenolinguistics. I study the question of what persists. A pause, the upper limbs shifting into something she'd later learn meant approximating. Your word might be philosopher, though I find the word small for the thing. What persists? Lena repeated. That's what you study. It is the only question, you said, when one stands before something 4 billion years old. She decided, in that moment, that she liked you. It was an unprofessional thought. She held on to it anyway. They went in together, their two shuttles flying parallel, because the admirals on both sides had decided that mutual surveillance was preferable to unilateral advantage and called it cooperation. Close enough. The structure was not visible to the naked eye at 10,000 kilometers. It was visible to instruments in ways that made the instruments behave strangely. Power readings that shouldn't have been possible, geometry that the mapping software kept trying to correct because it assumed its own error. It was only when they crossed 5,000 kilometers that it resolved into something the human visual system could process, and what it resolved into was a kind of enforced humility. It looked like something grown rather than built. Vast branching architectures of matter that was neither metal nor stone nor anything catalogued, reaching outward from a central mass in patterns that were either random or operating on a logic too large to see from inside. It was dark except where it wasn't, where luminescence moved through it slowly, like thoughts. It is thinking, you said. They were on an open comm channel now, both shuttles, both crews. Yu's upper limbs were moving in ways Lena was beginning to tentatively decode. She thought the pattern meant reverence, or possibly grief, or possibly both, which maybe were the same thing at sufficient scale. You think it's conscious? She asked. I think it was always conscious, you said. I think we are interrupting something very long. The signal changed when they crossed 1,000 kilometers. It had been mathematical before, proof upon proof upon proof, in the universal language of structure. Now it became something else. It became almost biological. Lena stared at the new patterns and felt her throat tighten with a recognition she couldn't name. You, she said. Run your translation matrix on this. Silence. Long enough that she began to worry the channel had failed. Lena. Yu's voice had changed. Something in the harmonics. Run your genetic analysis. The full panel. Run it on yourself and send the results to me. That's a strange time for. Please. She ran it. It took 6 minutes. She sent the results. Another silence. Lena, you said. I am going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it before you respond. All right. My genetic panel and yours. A pause. The upper limbs, she realized, had stilled completely. She had never seen them still before. They are the same. Not similar. Not analogous. The same. The same base pairs. The same repair mechanisms. The same markers that your biologists call junk DNA and mine call echo memory. We have been diverging for approximately. A longer pause. The sound of calculation. 3 million years. Lena looked at her hands. She looked at Yu's hands. 4 of them, yes, differently arranged, yes, but with the same underlying structure, the same joints in the same geometry, the same. We're family, she said. We are the same people, you said, who forgot each other. It took them another 4 hours to understand the signal well enough to form a response. They worked in the space between their shuttles, sharing screens across the comlink, Lena's pattern recognition chasing Yu's structural philosophy around and around until something clicked, until the signal stopped being noise and became, unmistakably, a question. A single question, asked in the only language old enough to predate both of their civilizations. Are you ready? Ready for what? Lena said, not into the comm, just to herself, to the structure that filled every viewport. But you heard. I think, you said carefully, that is precisely what it is asking us to determine. Together. She thought about the garden where a warship had been. She thought about the mathematics that had felt familiar the moment she saw it, familiar the way her own face felt familiar in a photograph, recognizable and slightly strange and entirely, undeniably hers. She thought about 3 million years of separation, 2 civilizations building their separate cosmologies, their separate philosophies, their separate fears, and both of them receiving the same signal on the same Tuesday, and both of them sending a scientist and a thinker to this point, to this question. She opened a channel to Admiral Graves. Admiral. I need you to stand down weapons. Dr. Chen. All of them. Permanently, for this mission. I need you to do it now, and I need you to do it because I'm telling you that if you don't, the only thing we will accomplish here is demonstrating that we failed. A breath. I need you to trust me. A long silence. The kind that contains a struggle. You have 48 hours, Graves said. Then I make my own decisions. She closed the channel. Looked at the structure. Felt the question vibrating in the air between her and the machine and you. What does it want? She said. You was quiet for a moment. Then, I think it wants what all parents want. It built us, both of us. It seeded us and waited and watched us grow in our separate directions, and now it is asking. The upper limbs moved, and this time she could read it clearly. Hope. It is asking if we grew up. And did we? I think, you said, that is what the next 48 hours are for. They sent their response at hour 31. Not in mathematics. Mathematics was the language of the question, and you don't answer a parent's question in the same register they asked it. You answer it in what you've learned. In what you've become. They sent everything. 17 days of their working together, annotated. The moment Lena had recognized you's hands. The moment you had stilled. The argument they'd had at hour 19 over methodology that had turned, somewhere in the middle, into something more like a conversation between people who were learning to trust each other. The standing down of weapons, not just Graves, but the Keth Admiral too, after you had made a transmission Lena wasn't party to, speaking in harmonics the translator couldn't fully render. They sent the act of trying. The whole mess and effort of it. The machine's response came in 0.3 seconds, the same as before. This time, nothing changed. No transformation, no garden, no demonstration. Instead, a door opened. In the side of the structure, at a human and Keth scale, as though it had always been there, as though it had been waiting for them specifically. An invitation. Lena looked at you across the screen. You's upper limbs were moving in every register at once. Reverence, grief, hope, humor, the untranslatable overtones of a feeling 3 million years in the making. Shall we? You said. Lena Chen thought about her coffee, going cold on her desk 4 billion light-years of meaning ago. She thought about the ungraded papers. She thought about everything that had seemed, on a Tuesday, like the ordinary shape of a life. We shall, she said, and they flew toward the open door together. In the mission logs, later, Lena would record the following note. We went looking for aliens and found ancestors. We went looking for a weapon and found a question. We went looking for something to conquer and found something that had been waiting, with extraordinary patience, for us to deserve an answer. I think the machine knew we weren't ready for 3 million years. I think it knew the moment we were. I think it recognized us by what we did when we were frightened, whether we reached for weapons or reached for each other. We almost got it wrong. We didn't. That, I think, is the whole story.